Hello, everyone. We are live. Welcome to the protest of Judge Rotenberg Center. Today, our objective is to bring you voices from the community and community stakeholders, and we'll have people dropping in. We have a few people who have lots of things on their plate today, so they might just jump in and might not, but we have lots of special guests today, and we are waiting for the protest on the ground to get started. So we will be live streaming from the protests in Canton, Massachusetts, shortly. So thank you all for being with us. Can we see the comments and see who all is here? Let us know where you're from and just say hello. If you're using LinkedIn and you want to interact, you might want to jump onto YouTube or Facebook stream because you can comment and interact with their presenters and hosts today. And I am Tara Vance. I'm the founder of Neuroclassic and CEO. And this has been one of the most central issues to my advocacy for the last 6 years. And this Judge Rotenberg Center intersects with my other passions in advocacy, which is anti-racism and communication rights. A lot of the people at Judge Rotenberg Center are apraxic, and they have motor disinhibition, and they are non-speaking or have unreliable or minimal communication. And that leaves them with the only means of communication that they have is a risk of being shocked. So they can't even protest with their body language or advocate for themselves. They have no option but to comply, and that is unacceptable. It is unbelievable that we even have to be here today asking people to stop torturing us in 2022. But we are never going to stop. Every single day we see new position statements, and we want to urge everyone out there to contact your local school districts, your local representatives. Most states have a law currently that bans electroshock, but there are 9, I believe, that don't yet. So let's make, of course, Massachusetts. And we have been fighting for a long time to get a resolution passed in Massachusetts that was voted on yesterday. And they voted again for, I don't know, this might be the 5th or 6th similar bill. They voted again to put it to study, which means they're not ready to make a decision, and the bill just stalled out and is nothing. So we have to try other means besides Massachusetts local legislature, because we want this ended right now. So I want to turn it over to Jude to introduce himself, and then Kate is going to be mostly helping with moderating the chat and interacting and fixing all the things. So, Jude?
Hi, is my audio okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, my name is Jude Ofalake Olabodin. I am a trans Nigerian autistic parent of two autistic children, and I am the Chief Decolonizing Officer of Neuroclassic. And I am an educator in harm reduction and transformative justice and decolonization of our advocacy and movement work. And today I will be co-hosting with Tara, and we really right now we're out here fighting for our right to life, our quality of life, and our right to live without struggle. And that it starts with us, this community, but for all of us. because to allow this to happen to someone else, it's internalized automatically that you believe there's a certain point where you deserve to be treated like this. That if this were ever to happen to you. So this doesn't deserve to happen to anyone in our humanity, in our right to life, and our right to communicate and recognize this. So we are out here trying to fight for all of us, but specifically right now, look, our right not to be tortured. And passing it on to Kate.
Hey, I'm Kate Jones. I'm the CCO of Neuroplastic. I'm also a psychotherapist, I'm autistic, ADHD, and a parent to 3 small autistics too. I'm mostly going to be moderating the chat, making sure that our guests are okay and they've got access to come and talk to you. But I'm here if you need anything, so I'll be watching the chat.
Thank you so much. We're still waiting for the protests on the ground to dial in. It shouldn't be long. So, in the meantime, we have for you one of my most favorite humans in the world and one of my advocacy heroes, Gregory Tino, and his mom, who's going to be his communication partner today. And Linda and Gregory, I'll turn it over to you now, and you can introduce yourself or Gregory, and let's hear what Gregory has to say.
All right.
Thank you, Tara. Thanks for having us. This is what my son wrote the other day. My name is Gregory Tino, and I'm 29 years old. I'm a non-speaking autistic who communicates by pointing to letters on a letterboard. When I heard what is going on at the Judge Rotenberg Center, my first thought was, that could have been me. From age 8 to well up into my teens, I became aggressive to my family and teachers. Being like that was not because I was frustrated or misunderstood. Yes, being unable to verbalize my basic wants and needs was frustrating. I won't deny that. But being aggressive was a terrible motor loop that was beyond my control. You see, I have issues with apraxia, a mind-body disconnect in which my body does things that I don't want it to. Now that I have a way to communicate, it enables me to tell you this. My out-of-control body creates the perfect storm. You become anxious because you know you can't control yourself, which makes you less able to control yourself. I want you to realize that my aggression was never purposeful behavior. The thought that people are being shocked at JRC over similar behavior is terrifying, to say the least. The way I was helped was being surrounded by compassion, not punishment. Sometimes being punished actually escalated the aggression. Such barbaric treatment of people with a physical reason for their issues needs to be stopped. There is no easy answer to helping autistics with severe behavioral problems. Yes, autism is misunderstood, but I can say with certainty that torturing autistics like they are an animal is never the answer. Please help stop the abuse of people like me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gregory. You are amazing. And Gregory, if you go through Neuroclassic's videos, and recent posts, you'll see Gregory has lots of amazing videos, and he has a blog and has published a few books. And he now has a Facebook page, so you can follow Gregory C. Tino on Facebook. Everything Gregory posts is amazing, so you definitely want to follow Gregory. Thank you so much, and thank you for the labor that you put into that, and we will see you soon. Always a pleasure. Love you guys. And now we have a very special guest, Oliver Lewis, who I will welcome. So happy to have you today. A little bit nervous, gotta be honest, because your voice is a very powerful one. And I would like for you to introduce yourself, because That's a big resume too. And let us know how you feel about Judge Rotenberg Center and what you would like people to know.
Sure. Thanks so much. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
You sound great.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And first of all, thank you for the overly generous introduction. And thank you very much for inviting me to participate and stand with you and the other activists and advocates calling for an end once and for all to this barbaric so-called treatment. So as you mentioned, my name is Oliver Lewis, and I'm a human rights lawyer practicing in the UK, based in the UK, but practicing internationally from Doughty Street Chambers in London. And I specialize in the rights of disabled people, in particular, people with intellectual disabilities and or autistic people as well. And so I've known about this issue for some years and have been shocked that it happened and continues to happen. And I reminded myself that in May 2010, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture sent a letter to the US government calling on the government to investigate allegations of torture in the Judge Rotenberg Center. And responding to that request, a representative of the JRC said, quote, "It's ridiculous to equate JRC's aversive therapy, which is court approved on a case-by-case basis, with torture, as it is to call a surgeon's knife cutting into flesh an assault with a dangerous weapon." And they went on to say that isn't it better to use a 2-second small shock to the skin to prevent someone from, they gave the examples of gorging their eyes out or pulling their teeth out or starving themselves to death. Those are the examples that they gave. And they said that no sensible person would refuse to use such a humane treatment. The alternative, they suggested, is to be drugged into insensibility, restrained, secluded, and warehoused in a state mental hospital. In effect, a form of living torture, end quote. So I was surprised at that very creative defense of the JRC, where they framed their practice as a zero-sum game. In other words, either let us shock these disabled children, or else they will suffer serious harm or even die. And that's really quite a silly argument, isn't it? Because we know that throughout the history of psychiatry, many treatments have been framed in that way. Many treatments have been dressed up as science and therapy and in the best interests of children, of patients. And I'm thinking of the example of lobotomy as a very good example of that. The UN Special Rapporteur said that, look, the use of electricity on anyone's body raises the question as to whether it is therapeutic. Does it inflict pain and suffering tantamount to torture in violation of international law? And we can have a huge debate about whether this practice constitutes that big word, torture. But in a sense, it doesn't need to reach the level of being classified as torture. I would submit that the use of electricity in this way to control people's behavior, or in an attempt to control people's behavior and quell behavior that challenges, would be classed as inhuman and degrading treatment, which also is absolutely banned in very basic international human rights standards that are binding on most countries, including the US. And we know that given that many service providers of services for autistic children and so on in the US, even in Massachusetts, and of course around the world, do not use electric charges. And guess what? There are other and perhaps better ways of preventing harm and managing risk, and also of enabling people to thrive brilliant lives in the community. Given that the norm is not to use this, it means that the practice is unnecessary, isn't it? And so I am surprised that it's still happening. And in conclusion, I stand in solidarity with you all, activists and advocates, calling for the Judge Rotenberg Center to throw the use of contingent electric skin shock. I like the acronym, it's CESS. So they should throw that cess into the cesspit of history. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, wow, that is quotable. Throw that into the cesspit of history. Yes, thank you. We have one question from the audience that we'd like to get to. If you have a second. Chelsea Maldonado says, in what ways does the U.S. refusal to ratify UNCRC impact JRC's ability to operate? Would this be allowed if we had ratified this treaty?
Yeah,
and you might explain a little bit of what that means to the audience too.
Of course. So the CRC stands for the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, so Convention on the Rights of the Child, which almost all countries around the world have ratified, but the US has not. I would also add that the US has not ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities as well. That's the CRPD. Even though the US played a leading role in negotiating the treaty at the UN. Look, I mean, on the one hand, of course, it would make a difference if the US ratified the CRC or the CRPD, because then if the US also ratified the optional protocols to those conventions, sorry to be technical, then people in the US who thought that their rights had been violated under those conventions could send a complaint to a committee in Geneva, and that would be looked at. So yes, it would make a difference in that way. But look, I'm sure that people in the US don't need the US to ratify international human rights treaties in order to realize that this practice is wrong and it should be stopped. And the US has ample domestic procedures at state and federal level to ensure that the practice stops. So I hope that with all of this advocacy, which is now growing apace again, that the authorities in Massachusetts will do the right thing and stop this practice happening, and maybe even shut down the JRC if it's so incapable of governing itself and providing humane care to disabled people.
Thank you so much. So one thing we noticed that the Judge Rotenberg Center task force from ABAI, which is the ABA International professional or the credentialing body, they have a task force evaluating JRC right now, and they are saying that since this is medical, it does not count as corporal punishment. Do you think legally they can just declare that? Or is it legal to prescribe pain as punishment? That it's bizarre.
I think that's bizarre. Obviously, I'm not a US lawyer, so I don't know about the sort of classifications in US law or the state law there. But as I mentioned, there are obviously several examples throughout history where so-called treatment, which has been prescribed by doctors and administered by clinicians, has been inappropriate and has caused pain and has caused harm. And those practices have then been stopped. And so I don't really think it makes a difference as to whether you classify this practice as corporal punishment, and therefore what, it's okay, in the same way that it might be someone says it's okay to hit children, that's corporal punishment. I don't think either of those things, electrocuting or hitting children, I don't personally consider as being appropriate, in the same way as some medical treatments, such as lobotomy, or forced sterilization of disabled people would be appropriate. So I don't know whether it makes a difference to categorize it like that. And certainly from the point of view of international human rights law, what we would look at is, of course, the purpose of the practice, but also the impact upon the individual, in terms of pain, in terms of duration, in terms of short-term benefit or harm, long-term psychological and physical harm and effects on the person in the round.
Thank you so much for coming by today and for all the work that you've done for autistic people and otherwise disabled people. And we hope to work with you in the future a lot
definitely
on this issue. Thank you.
Definitely, if I can be of help, you know where I am. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. You have a good one. And right now, it looks like we will unmute them. It looks like the live stream is, their camera fell over. So, yeah, they've muted themselves, so I can't even unmute them. But we will wait for them to figure out that they've lost their vantage point and they pick up the phone again. So, we have lots of comments and people all over the world. Kate, have you seen? Oh, good. We have two very amazing people jumping in here. Oh, it looks like maybe Sarah's not ready yet. I'll take you out until you give me you type in the chat when you're ready. So Sienna is with us today from Australia. And thank you so much for joining us and welcome. And Sienna has a very important message prepared, and I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself and
Hello, my name is Sienna, and I'm an autistic AAC user from Melbourne, Australia. Here I work in disability advocacy and have been involved in the Australian Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of Disabled People. This is a national investigation into the treatment of disabled people. I have assisted other disabled people to give evidence and will soon be giving my own evidence to the Commission. I've heard a lot in my time working for the Commission, but it doesn't, and shouldn't, take my experience to know that disabled people feel loss, loneliness, and pain just as much as non-disabled people. Knowing that the GED device is still in use today brings tears to my eyes, and knowing that the GED device is only allowed to be used against disabled people despite being called a torture device by the United Nations makes me sob. This is discrimination. Disabled people are still people, yet the use of the GED does not acknowledge this. The GED is used to punish behaviors, many of which are innately autistic. Most of these behaviors do not even harm other people, and should be celebrated, not punished. Punishing an autistic person for stimming is just like punishing an allistic person for expressing their emotions, such as smiling, laughing, hugging or venting to another person after a bad day. It is beyond cruel to punish autistic people for stimming, let alone with a device as awful as the GED. I wish that our Disability Royal Commission could reach the United States so we could stop the use of the GED. It is a cruel device and should never be used against any person, whether they are disabled or not.
Thanks, Sienna. It was really great to have you here with us. I know that Ben Bro is going to be here as well. And I think Tara is just maybe organizing for Ben's video to play.
Oh no, I was actually talking and my mic had come unplugged. So I'm so sorry. I'm over here fidgeting and stimming away, and I unplugged my headset. So thank you so much, Sienna. I was saying that we should not have to ask autistic people to think about this could be happening to us, right? The people at Judge Rotenberg Center do not even get to know that we are out here fighting for them. They're not allowed to know we exist. They're not getting neurodiversity affirming self-education. The only education that they're getting is that they deserve to be tortured for behaviors that are beyond their control and often are the things that we celebrate. I'm over here stimming so hard that I pulled my mic out. Would they shock me for that? And they say these people have pulled out their own teeth and they've really hurt themselves, and so have we. We have done that. A lot of us, I've pulled out my own teeth before. It's part of OCD and motor disinhibition. So we want you to know that it's really hard to be us, and we need better supports. It's almost $250,000 for some per year to treat people this way. That's how much it costs per student. I think 290,000 was the average last time I saw for students on the GED. And we can support autistic people effectively with much less if we stop trying to do the wrong things that make everything worse, right? So this is commodifying disability, and autistic people should not have to think about this. We should not be asking people to help us advocate against torture. It's horrifying. So thank you so much, Sienna. You are so powerful, and you can read more of Sienna's work at Neuroclassic, and we hope to publish a lot more in the future from Sienna. So thank you so much. Everybody in the audience has been saying great things and thanking you. So make sure you read those comments. Okay, we're going to see if we can get the live stream. No, they still have their mic muted. So Kate, maybe you can get them a message to unmute. Try Rachel Dorsey and see if she can let them know that we'd like to check in with them. And yeah, Jude, Kate, do you want to weigh in as we wait for?
Sure. I'm just going to send a message. There was a request for you to repeat the cost of a student being at JRC.
Okay, here we go.
Oh yes, yeah,
290,000 on average annually.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are begging for better resources, and this is not the best way to spend this to help autistic people. And they keep saying this is the worst. Yes. Almost $250,000 a year per person. And we're thinking like, if we could get a couple $100 a month for a lot of people.
Okay, I'm going to weigh in now. Like, that is the most insult, like all of it all together, but that just adds insult to injury, because a lot of these stims that we're literally doing is because they put us in crisis, because we're struggling, because we can't get those proper support and resources. So the only thing that we can do to relieve stress, to survive while we're struggling alone, because you put that otherism, because we're different, because we can't conform to make you comfortable, because I'm shaking my arms, because I need like chewable jewelry, because I can't look you in the eye, because I'm stressed out, and I'm even more stressed out because you treat me badly because of those things. I need to stim more, and you take that away from me, and I can barely afford to survive in this loop, and you pay $290K instead of helping supporting me, so I actually could feel better, have healing, actually have actual support. So they put us in crisis, we cry out in pain, and then they punish us for crying out in pain. And that's the gaslighting, the gall, the dehumanization of it all. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And we had a question, where does this funding come from? A lot of it is, I think all of it is taxpayer money. Yeah, I don't think any of the people there are pay private tuition. I think that this is, and a lot of the people there are from New York and not Massachusetts. They keep saying these are the worst cases in the country, in the nation, but they almost all come from one neighborhood or just a couple neighborhoods in New York. And yeah, no, this is not the quote worst in the country or the world. And we see what we know some of the survivors. We've been in contact with them. We know people who've worked there. We've been in contact with them. Oh, we lost Wolfheart. He was next. They were next. And so we know already that the things they're being shocked for, they might have had some self-harm incidents that were extreme that got them on the GED, where they lost all of their rights and were appointed someone who was going to, for potentially forever, decide for them that this is best for them, and they don't have the option to consent. Judge Rotenberg Center is threatening to sue us because we said they don't get the option to consent. Well, they don't. So sue us, please. Because we're not going to say that people are choosing this when you shock people for trying to remove the GED. That means they are trying to revoke consent. And yeah, so there's no. They say that this is justified because it's the decision they will make for themselves. No, we can interview 100,000 autistic people, 100 million. It doesn't matter. They're not going to say, I want someone to follow me around with a remote and torture me all the time for things I can't help. And if they did say that, then we would think that they needed some trauma care. No one is choosing this. Yeah. So let us, we're waiting for Wolfheart to come back.
Okay, while we're waiting, okay, so that I will, I don't know if y'all have seen this expression on my face, but I did not realize that this was taxpayer funded. And literally with that amount, so with each person that comes in, 290K, this is prison. Like, I knew it was prison, but literally this is prison. This is slavery. This is literally, it is more cost effective to keep people, to torture them, than to actually bring them healing. Because to actually support an autistic person to be able to navigate where we're disabled, we're not able to work these 9 to 5s, and you're trying to punish us for not being able to work those, where it would be a lot cheaper to help fund a person to support that, but that taxpayer funding doesn't pay 290K for that.
Yeah, it is jarring, isn't it? That, when you're out there advocating for better services and more money for autistic people, this is what they give it to. This is what they choose to support us. This is state sanctioned. right? We sent tens of thousands of emails through Neuroclastic. You all did. You logged on to Judge Rotenberg Center and you sent, we got copies of all of those emails, right? Tens of thousands of emails went out. So they know how you all feel. They know how we feel. And they choose to say, we don't have enough information. We're just going to pass the buck. We're just going to send this away. So we need to figure out what it is that has, all of these politicians and all of these judges, and how are they getting away with this? We don't know yet, but we are not going to stop until we figure it out and stop the shock. I am so excited to introduce Wolfhart to you today. Wolfhart is one of our veteran contributors and helps us out all the time. As soon as we need anything, we go straight to Wolfhart. They're always there to help.
Morning.
And Wolfhart is my soul son. Just so happy to have you here in this space with us. You want to introduce yourself and let us know how you feel and what your thoughts are about Judge Rotenberg Center.
Sure. So I go by Art. My full name as a writer tends to be Andrew James Sanchez, but I prefer not to use my dead name, so I use my indigenous name instead. I am Taino, Scottish, and a few other things, and that often comes about in my writing. To me, when I think about the Judge Rotenberg Center, I see it as nothing more than a glorified residential school, with many of the problems that residential schools have had in their influence and their attack on Indigenous culture. We see the common themes of forced amalgamation and behavioralism. By its nature and its abusive forms of therapy, it seeks to stop neurodivergent people and disabled people as a whole from existing to their fullest potential. To scared parents and scared professionals who don't realize the long-term harm that this manner of torture is causing their children, causing anyone affected by this harmful center. I spent a good portion of my life as a kind of vigilante, and I learned quite a bit about non-lethals, in particular tasers. The shocks utilized by the Rotenberg Center are a lot more painful than most tasers that are available for public to purchase. These shocks are employed whenever a person doesn't move in the way that the center and its professionals would want that person to. I mean, I often grab my wrists or move them, or I'll take my rings on and off as a form of stimming. I can imagine that if somebody had become a
Wolfhart, your mic is freezing. Your stream is cutting out for us.
My apologies.
Oh, there you are. Yeah, so just to, in case anyone missed anything, because it did skip a couple times, Wolfhart is saying that our indigenous Native American ancestors were put into residential schools, and you see the shame, the violence that autistic people, indigenous people have been put through. And I'm Shawnee and Roma, and when I look at my ancestry and I see what my ancestors have experienced is the same. It looks like Judge Rotenberg Center. And we know that 6 people have died horrifying deaths there, being tortured because they had things like a bowel obstruction, but they didn't have communication access. So their behavior was considered defiant. They didn't have a way to say, hey, I have a bowel obstruction. And so they shock them and put them in helmets that cause seizures, and these sensory torture helmets that look like something from a horror movie. And some people have died in restraints there, and from wearing these helmets that cause seizures and vomiting. It's horrifying. And it looks like the residential schools that our ancestors were put in. And the country is apologizing. They're realizing what they have done to Indigenous people. But they're still doing it, right? We know that the majority of people at Judge Rotenberg Center are Black and brown. And they're now claiming that even though I think 83% of the people at Judge Rotenberg Center are Black and brown, they're claiming that the majority of people they shock now are white. That the math doesn't add up. It's like they're responding to public relations to say they're not racist by choosing who's on the GED and who's not, so they don't look racist. No, that's racist too. You also are ableist and violent. You should not be shocking anyone because this is cruelty. I can't believe we even have to say this, but thank you, Wolfhart. Sorry about the mic and the connection. And we have another guest that we want to add. Kate, did you want to introduce? Do you have that pulled up? So I'll let Kate introduce Caroline, and thank you so much for joining us today, Caroline.
So Caroline Cole is a survivor, policy writer, and advocate that Neuroclastic has had the pleasure of collaborating with. The audience will have seen Caroline's policy and advocacy work over the past 2 years for the SICAA, Stop the Institutionalized Child Abuse Act, which most recently saw her at the White House with Paris Hilton and other advocates campaigning for its passage. She is also the co-host of the iHeart podcast series Trapped in Treatment, about the experience and abuses within the teenage treatment industry in the congregate care settings where we understand is due to start its 2nd season. So thank you, Caroline.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's really an honor, and I'm so grateful for all of the work that you do in this space.
Thank you. Can you tell us your position on Judge Rotenberg Center and maybe some of the work that you're doing to combat this?
Sure, absolutely. So my expertise is in institutional child abuse, and we've worked very diligently in the past couple of years specifically on troubled teen industry facilities. And what we see overall is these facilities are putting profit over people, and they're using aversive interventions such as the GED to act as interventions for this type of behavior. And I'm a survivor. I went to a troubled teen industry facility for 2.5 years, and I am now 32 years old, and I am still dealing with the trauma that I'm so sorry. I'm seeing in the chat that we need captions. Is that something that I need to do on my end? Okay. Sorry. Apologies.
Captions, real quick. They are, this is auto caption, and that is something we do have them turned on. So you'll have to adjust your Facebook or YouTube settings to turn on the captions, like with any video. That you usually have 3 dots in the top corner of a video to turn captions on. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. so what we're seeing consistently is that we're focusing on behavior. We're not focusing on the people. And when we look at behavior, that is about other people's comfortability and not what is happening inside me internally. And that's what we're saying. We are sending the message that we care more about the comfortability of the staff at JRC, and we care more about the profit that they are bringing in. And Tara, I believe you said that was $290,000 annually. We should be giving them the most holistic, compassionate treatment with that level of revenue. It's insane. And so what we're seeing is these systems are being upheld because they are making so much money. We actually had a facility owner, this was a facility in Nevada, who said, and I quote, they had said receiving public dollars to care for these kids is like drinking water out of a fire hose. That is their attitude about receiving these dollars. It's like drinking water out of a fire hose.
That was from us. That analogy. Kate actually drew a graphic for that one.
Yes. And so I mean, at what cost? We're having people who are being literally tortured here in the United States. In fact, when I first learned about this issue and I heard about the GED, my logical mind could not comprehend that that's what was happening. I was thinking, well, I mean, how strong is this shock? How is this actually being used? I couldn't even comprehend what was actually happening. And so when I read the survey that you had done of the 900 ABA professionals, I was absolutely abhorred to learn that this device is 6 times stronger than a stun gun. I can't even comprehend what that is like to live in that kind of fear, in that kind of distress, and to be utterly trapped and subjected to that torture every single day on a daily basis. This has to stop. Is this something that we would allow in a public school system? It's not. Why are we allowing this for autistic people? It's wrong. It's inhumane. It's damaging. It's archaic. And we know better. And here's the argument. We do know better. And so why are we still allowing this? It's heartbreaking what is happening at JRC.
Thank you. Yes to all of that. And what you said, we should be using that $290,000 a year to, we could have a luxury trauma, like luxury accommodations and like the best, most quality trauma care. It can be a restorative retreat because that is what they're going to need after having lived through this. And we know because we are in contact with survivors what life is like for them. We saw live testimony from someone who's worked with survivors after they've exited Judge Rotenberg Center, how they wake up screaming, how they constantly ask, are you going to shock me now? For doing nothing. And it's, start crying at meals because they're not under threat of like needing to eat things that are disgusting to them. So just trying to eat, the fear that comes back with the trauma being reactivated every single time they see food because they've lived under being shocked for not eating what was served to them. And this is horrifying. So thank you so much, Carolyn, for coming and for all of the work that you do. And we hope to continue working with you and your org and to help in any way that we can to stop institutional abuse. I too am a survivor, and I'm 41 now, almost 42 this month, and I have not healed. I still have the night terrors and the trauma flashbacks. In fact, there are times that people post comments in the Judge Rotenberg Center posts that we make, or things that I have to read to do this activism that have caused me. And I hate to put this out there. I shouldn't have to violate my own privacy this way, but I feel that I have to, because I can't live in peace for a second until the people at Judge Rotenberg Center are free of this. So I have had to call 911 for myself this year twice, and almost a few other times, but had some very amazing other activist friends one who survived shock torture, just helped me through that. But that is the level of severity of the trauma of like having all of this reactivated all the time. And what I've been through, I imagine pales in comparison to what the people at Judge Rotenberg Center have been through. And so please, I am telling you from personal experience, this is too much. That we can never do this again. So thank you, Carolyn. And did we have any questions before? And we have Emmanuel with us today too. So very happy about that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tara, for having me. And I did want to add just one more thing. I challenge legislators in Massachusetts, if they are not actively working to prevent this from happening, I challenge you to strap on one of these devices and try it. And if there is opposition to that, and if you feel like that would be unsafe, that would be hurtful, and as a legislator, you would not put yourself in that position, then we have our answer. This should never be happening. And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate
We've had there's an org called Hops, Hooves, and Humanity that raised money to recreate the GED, to do a demonstration with it. And every single engineer, electrical and physics engineer, who have the ability to use the information that we have about the GED to reconstruct it, they have seen the specs after agreeing and said, there we go, Samantha Storm from Hops, Hoops, and Humanity. They've seen the specs. I've tried to ask people, and they've looked at the specs and said, no, this is possibly lethal. I cannot build this. And they've said, we can have EMTs on site. They still won't do it. They said they can't even fathom doing it for human rights, like for a demonstration, not to use on disabled people for being disabled, but
horrific
to use on abled people one time as a demonstration. They still won't build one. That's what they're dealing with. So when JRC acts like, oh, it's just like a bee sting, well, no, we have videos. We've all seen these videos. If you haven't seen them, don't, because you won't sleep anymore the same way ever after you've watched them. But we know better. We know how horrible they are. So thank you so much, Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Emmanuel, thank you so much for joining us. If you've been reading and following Neuroclassic, you'll notice that a lot of our more popular articles that have gotten a lot of traffic and over a long period of time now have audio. Emmanuel has been adding audio so that you can listen to the articles, and they're amazing. So, hey, Emmanuel, thank you.
Hi, Tara. How are you? Can you hear me?
Sound great.
Okay. I didn't have much time, but I'm grateful that you allowed me to come on to your protest. I think it's incredibly helpful what you're doing here, and I have been doing voiceover work for the organization, so every play is works in my favor. But yeah, as someone who's had to read the most popular articles in regards to the Judge Rotenberg Center, I find what they've done definitely horrifying. And the sad thing is that autistic people and organizations have a long history of just being left out of conversations discussing what's going on with them. And though we may work to stopping the Judge Rotenberg Center, we must remember that it is part of a system. It is part of part of the system. It is part of an organization that essentially that essentially allows them to thrive. That essentially allows them to continue to exist unabated and with full legal and political powers. So protesting on the ground is important. Hearing other people speak is important. You know, I stand by anyone who refuses to let any of this continue any longer. And, you know, hopefully, you know, it's my hope that we will be able to bring to light the systems and the people that allow JRC and its allies to exist.
Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for all the work that you.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Oh, we got the live stream.
Oh, hold on.
Finally. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Here we are. Woo-hoo! Stop the shock. Stop the shock. Woo-hoo!
Sarah.
We are here. We're going to be what? Yeah. Oh, we have handmade fidgets too. I can hear you, Tara.
Awesome. How many people do you think are there today
Tara.
on the ground? Can you hear me?
You're asking. Okay. I can, and there looks like there's about 20 people here.
That's fantastic. And
There's like 20 people here. 20.
And we have loved seeing the signs that everyone has, and we're so grateful to you for doing this. What's the energy like there today?
Yes.
I think we're dealing with some serious lag.
The energy is fantastic. Yes. There's fantastic people. Do you guys mind being on live stream? All right. These are my friends right here. Stop the socks.
See the Neuroclassic shirt?
BCBAs again. Socks. Do no harm. Stop the socks. Thank you. Hey, friends. Show me your shirt. Do you see our shirt? Yes, stop the shock.
Okay, we are going to.
Do you have more questions?
Well, do we have any questions from the
Do you have more
audience right
questions?
now?
I can kind of see this.
We're having a major lag issue, I believe.
Yeah, let me hold that.
Okay,
So I know you're having a lag issue. I love you all. We're going to turn the mic off.
Thank you so much. And
thank you so much for your service, all of you.
And thank you for coming, Emmanuel. We're
yeah,
what you say is always powerful, and you can read Emmanuel's writing on Neuroclassic too. And we have another special guest that I am so excited to have. Let me check in and see if Tejas is ready right now. We'll wait a second and check in a minute. They might be getting ready still. So, Jude, where are you at right now? How you feeling? Oh, Tejas is ready. So,
Okay.
awesome. Well, we'll just turn it over to you then and your communication partner, and you have the floor. Tejas says, I'm Tejas. I'm autistic. I have the incapacity to speak. I have the incapacity to will my body to do what I want it to do. I can, when I'm tired, pull, push, suggest with my body that I can harm others. I see in their eyes that they fear autistic's rage. It crushed my soul to see this. I am no threat to anyone, least of all my good friends. When I'm tired, anxious, I have no capacity to stop my body from pulling or pushing someone. If you presume, then, that my actions are intentional, you start the cycle of my losing any capacity to rein in my body towards obeying my mind. Instead, I panic as my body goes further. Down. And we are giving Tejas time to put his response in the chat. Instead, I panic as my body goes further down and out of control. Don't hurt my body or my soul with words or actions that let me slide deeper and deeper into incapacity to de-escalate my body's inability to inhabit itself based on my mind's commands. And this is something that we need everyone to listen to non-speakers, because when they get communication access, we learn from them that they are non-speaking and they do the things they do because their bodies have motor planning disability and motor disinhibition. Sometimes they can't make themselves do what they want to do with their body, including move their mouth to speak. And sometimes they can't stop their bodies from saying or doing things like a tic, like Tourette's, but not the same, sometimes the same repetitive behaviors, and sometimes just impulsive things that they didn't plan to do. It just happened. The brain is an organ like the stomach or, the lungs, and sometimes the mind, your consciousness, and the brain don't work together. Like a hiccup or a sneeze, these things are not intentional behaviors. Whoever trusts that an autistic is working on their own tussle with their own body regulation will never shock them. I struggle every waking moment with my body, tired of being seen as worthless and inhuman. It is autistics who are not inhuman. They are the ones who shock them, who are inhuman. Agreed.
And there's so much where I say being diagnosed with autistic being autistic, understanding that really logistically helped me understand so much that happened in my life. But overall, it helped me understand that I was never deserving of harm, regardless of me being autistic or not. And so much in like advocating for ourselves, it's us a lot of the times, like the level of pain, of what's acceptable to, like, oh, it's this only little pinprick, where literally sensory threshold where it was a pinprick to you could be literally might feel like my hand is melting off, but me like taking away our bodily autonomy, and that it's somewhere there's some kind of threshold where it's acceptable to somebody else that my suffering is at an acceptable level. A lot of the times it feels like trying to get other people to sympathize with us. I can keep reading. The body of an average autistic is a maverick. Tiredness, exhaustion, sensory, mauling, anxiety take charge. It is not my body. It is not my body. It is not my body, hauling me to places I don't want to go. It is not my mind that bends my body to its purpose. I cannot control my body. I cannot control my body. And in understanding that they cannot control their body, they definitely don't deserve harm. But we're not deserving of harm on any level. We deserve to consent on every level. Our bodies always belong to us. And I feel like being diagnosed with autism and understanding that helps us find community to put words to these things, but also just understanding the depths of upholding this system that brings this kind of pain of there's no level that of I should have to say that I deserve to be harmed at all. Like why is this up for debate? It's not up for debate for you, so why is it up for debate for me?
We see a whole lot. We know 87% of autistic people have clinically significant dyspraxia or global apraxia, this motor planning disability, right? So not all autistic people, but most, by and large, have motor planning disability, and that also comes with motor disinhibition. So like things like tics and not being able to stop stimming. If you look at the primary symptoms of Tourette syndrome, you see things like biting your fingernails and grinding your teeth. Those are tics. Those are things that we do. We got some more from Tejas. I cannot control my body. I cannot control my body. I cannot control my body. Is it okay to shock autistics who cannot control their own body? Would you shock a toddler? Would you shock a comatose person? Would you shock a rage-fueled, impulsive person, violent to himself and others, whose mind is screaming at his own body to stop, shocking them in ways that make them suffer from pain, autistic self-hate and self-loathing? Words can wound us. Words can wound us. Words can wound us. My punishment goes on and on and on. I cannot even imagine the wounds and trauma that punishment and shock would inflict.
I feel like, do the people at the Judge Rotenberg Center understand what it's like every day to have to fight for your right to live? Do they know that's what we're doing? That they're fighting for the right to kill us, to suffer till we die?
One of the main things that we see from the people who defend Judge Rotenberg Center are violently aggressive attempts to shut down discussions on communication rights, right? They will say that Tejas and Sienna and Gregory are not really communicating, right? They say these people are just having someone else write their words for them. And they try to stop communication rights because it would be a violation of federal law to shock or punish someone for something related to disability. It is a violation. So they say this doesn't exist. Well, we have a vast evidence body to prove that yes, it does exist. But they still continue to operate as if motor disinhibition or not being able to control your body doesn't exist. But we know from lots of orgs that are extremely successful working and have amazing non-speaker populations who are thriving. And that doesn't mean it's easy for them, but they are in community, they are thriving, they are happy, they are exercising consent, and they are being seen and heard because they now have communication. And that's what they're trying to block, to say that Judge Rotenberg Center is more humane. We shouldn't have to be asking people to see this. Teja says, if you see my humanity, you would not shock me.
And that's what a lot of this is, like literally every day having to wake up and debate our humanity. Like, remember, I'm a human being all the time, 24/7, no matter what I do. And the stress that puts on our bodies just causes us to go into even more crisis. And then we're punished for being in crisis for you robbing us of our humanity. And it's a vicious cycle that's not fair, that we have to fight for our lives like this and can continue be beaten down and fought to torture us, because it's more profitable to torture us than actually get us the support and healing. And I want everybody out there to know that your life is worth way much more than $290K. That there's no amount of money on this planet that is worth more than you. But I also do know that if I had $290K right now, I'd be all right. I would be all right. A lot of us would be all right. So instead of actually giving us the support and resources, you literally fight to beat us down to keep your pockets lined. And it's blatant and clear. Where people who literally could not, who were COVID being a mass disabling event, and this system did not pay nobody $290K to stay home to be able to take care of our families and not have to go back to work. Over 1 million people died in the United States alone, but y'all can pay $290K to torture people.
And when Teja said, if you see my humanity, you would not shock me. That is, once you're in community with non-speakers and they become your close friends and you know them and their amazing advocacy that has such a broad perspective compared to what you have without their advocacy, right? You need to know what their lives are like before you understand any of this. But when you see their humanity, when they become your close friends, you can't stop seeing them in the people at Judge Rotenberg Center, right? You know what these behaviors really mean and how to support people through them. And nobody is asking non-speakers. Nobody is asking us. They are declaring they know what we need. And when Wolfhart was on earlier and said, this is like the indigenous schools, my ancestors, Wolfharts, we were called savage, uncivilized. And all of the genocide against us was justified. These residential schools that killed thousands of us was justified by saying that we are uncivilized. It's the right thing to do to make us less savage. But it's still happening. Look at Judge Rotenberg Center. We don't feel safe anymore. We never did because it never stopped. So thank you to all of you out there who are doing something to stop this. And I want to introduce Sean Culkin from Culture City. Culture City is so relevant to this discussion right now. And thank you, Tejas, for coming and sharing those words. We're going to post Tejas's words on Neuroclastic as a post after this live stream, too, if that's okay with you, Tejas, because I want everyone to read these words 1,000 times until they are like peanut butter on your brain and they stick. Culture City is amazing because they're the opposite of Judge Rotenberg Center. They exist to provide sensory supports and comfort for people so that they can better engage in their everyday life. Today I saw a post about what orgs are really doing something for autistic people, and there were so many comments saying Culture City, I got a bag from them, and like my life has been so much better because now when I go out I have these amazing ear defenders, and I just felt like somebody cared about me for the first time when I went somewhere and I got welcomed and given this bag saying, hey, you know, we love you being here, and here are some supports that hopefully will make your experience better. And they have sensory vans that are like a little mobile heaven to go and park at events, and they're climate controlled, and they have calming lights, and it's just amazing. You got to check them out. But Sean, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little about Culture City and how Culture City feels about
Sure.
Judge
So,
Rotenberg Center.
so as Tara said, my name is Sean Culkin. I am a board member of Culture City, but I am also autistic myself. And when I was first informed about the situation that has been going on with these with shocking individuals on the autistic individuals, I apologize. When I first heard about this situation, it was something that was devastating to me. I couldn't wrap my head around it, honestly, because as an individual, I've never experienced it or never been under the threat of it. However, I have experienced a lot of pushback from the medical community. When I was 2 years old, they recommended institutionalization for me as a substitute for my parents because they didn't want, quote, my family to be broken up by trying to care for my needs. And as I grew up and my family really stayed around me, they've really found the opposite, that I was able to connect with the family and really help everybody grow, that I'm around, I like to think, and that other people around me help me grow. To hear such backwards rhetoric on what autism is and how to address autistic individuals is terrifying. And it's an honor to sit here knowing that there are individuals that are fighting for the rights of autistic individuals. Now, as for Culture City, we view how autism is addressed from a cultural perspective. We want to get autistic voices and autistic individuals at bare minimum an autistic presence in the common world, in the public. Autism is something that is often confined to safer places such as the individual's home or whatnot, and restricts their potential quality of life. And that's not to do with being autistic. That has to do with being autistic in a world that isn't kind to those that are autistic. So Culture City tries to advance these sorts of pushes forward. We try to provide sensory bags to individuals with headphones and communication devices and calming fidget toys and whatnot that really help individuals handle a sensory overload the best that they can and participate in the public, allowing them to go to public places and be seen and heard and have their impact felt in order to build the long-term change that is necessary in our society for autistic people, as well as anybody with invisible disabilities, to be respected. that's what I really find admirable about the movement that you've been doing here at Neuroclastic. And it's an honor to see the words from people such as Tejas and everybody else here participating, to see the work that they're putting forward and seeing everybody fight for each other. This is a world that 20 years ago was a fantasy. Autistic people standing for each other and forming a community and expressing important aspects of what it means to be human. So again, it's an honor to be recognized by a group of individuals such as yourselves, and to really be a part of a growing movement in accepting and including those with autism or autistic individuals in general discourse. It means the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sean, for coming, and make sure to thank Culture City for us, please, for doing this and taking a stand. We found that a lot of other orgs that are not just all autistic people have been so safe that they never take a stand. But Culture City has taken a stand on the topics that no one else is touching, like racism and abuse of autistic people in the criminal justice system, basically being convicted of crimes for being autistic. And that is something that most orgs don't have the courage to tackle, because there's a lot of risk in that kind of, and people say, oh, it's divisive, we just want to talk about the happy things. But Culture City has been brave, so we thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Of course, thank you. It's an absolute honor. Life isn't always about happy things. It's about maintaining a quality of life for everybody. And the fact that I can be not only a part of an organization, but a board member of an organization that truly respects the whole life of individuals with invisible disabilities has been life-changing for me. And thank you so much for helping amplify our voice as well. I think together we can do some fantastic things, and I hope that we see an end to these shock therapies. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sean. You have a great one.
You too.
So next we have Chelsea Maldonado, who's an Atlanta-based activist and investigative researcher with a focus on youth rights and institutional abuse. Chelsea's been using her lived experience to inform her activism since first publishing the Wasp Diaries blog in 2010. Today, Chelsea is a researcher for Trapped in Treatment podcast and curates new content for the Youth Emancipation Project. You can follow her on Twitter at Yep4Rights, and that's 4 with a number 4. Chelsea, thanks for being with us. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I feel super underqualified for this. There have been so many incredible speakers today. And so wow, I'm really, really impressed and just honored to be here. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for showing up.
Yeah. I do investigative research. So I know a lot of people earlier were talking about kind of how re-traumatizing it can be to have to read through all of the different news stories and comments and perspectives. And I would just like to hold some space for that and say thank you to all the other people who are pouring through that work generally. It's a lot. I first became aware of the Judge Rotenberg Center when I first started getting into youth rights advocacy. I'm a survivor of the troubled teen industry. I was actually sent to a facility outside of the country in Jamaica. And so, my focus was initially on institutionalization and just behaviorism in general. And learning about JRC was honestly like one of the most terrifying things that I discovered in my research. Just that it has been allowed to exist for so long, and that there appear to be so many parents in particular who are so supportive of what JRC does. I think that organized advocacy from parents was pretty shocking to me as an advocate. You know, we see some of that in the troubled teen industry, but not with the fervency that we see around JRC. And just the dehumanization of kind of, I don't know, saying my child has severe autism, or, you know, kind of dehumanizing and I guess stigmatizing their own kids is what I'm getting at there.
Yeah, I think, you know, my most generous assumption around that is that the parents are groomed just as much as autistic children are groomed.
Mm-hmm.
That it's instilled in them that them being comfortable is more important than bodily autonomy, because a lot of us were not actually taught true bodily autonomy or to question authority. So you need to live in this very set subject to do what I say, which is very dehumanizing. It doesn't offer communication, and so it is violent. So we were treated violently, so we instill this violence in our children. So other people treating our children violently isn't considered a bad thing, but it's violence all around. And we don't have to keep doing it, but it is still violence at the end of the day, and the dehumanization of all of us. But why do you want to do that to your children?
Yes. That's what I think. That's what's it's so hard for me to wrap my brain around it, right? Especially now that I'm a parent, you know, and I think about this, like, what, you know, I understand it can be difficult when a child has, you know, behaviors that are hard to manage, right? But that's what it is. It's a separate person, right? She's a separate person from me, and her behaviors are something she's using to express herself. And if she's in pain, it's going to be a lot more pain than what I'm going to experience as an onlooker, right? And I don't know why that seems to be so hard for so many people in our society to grasp, I guess, that, you know, someone in pain may hurt themselves. And sometimes people may just hurt themselves inadvertently, right? I don't know. Anyways, I feel woefully underqualified to offer a perspective on this, other than I hope this place gets shut down and we can stop the shock.
Yeah, definitely. You don't have to feel unqualified, because at the beginning and the end of the day, it's us advocating for each other. So all of our voices are equal, and we're in this together, and this is what it means to be in community and struggle together. It's not preaching over each other, but actually facilitating communication with one another. And I feel like that's why it's hard to grasp that concept, because we're not actually taught to honestly and truthfully communicate our feelings or emotions. We're not allowed to be angry, because literally we cry out in pain and they're telling us we're not in pain. So why would you tell that? And if somebody else is telling you they're crying out in pain, you're taught to punish them.
Mm-hmm.
But that knowledge isn't enough. We also have to change our behavior in that. So even being a parent, stopping that generational trauma this system's instilling, that's a part of it. Having this communication and sharing your story and sharing your feelings and sharing what you need and what you do, that is a part of it. That is a part of this process.
Yeah,
so
and
you are just as qualified. You are qualified.
Thank you. It's just like, this is such impressive work that's being done here, and I feel like I'm in the company of such great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. Your humanity qualifies you, and the way that you humanize autistics qualifies you. So thank you. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Chelsea. Next we have Eliza. Thank you for waiting so patiently. I know we're running behind schedule. We all have slightly ropey grasps on time as a concept here. So yeah, in my bio for you, I have that Eliza is with Unsilenced, and she's made aware of the abuse happening at residential facilities when she lost a family member to UHS facility, and now dedicates her time to making policy change. Eliza, thank you so much for being with us. Oh, I think you might be on mute too.
Sorry. Thank you for having me. I appreciate having the opportunity to speak today. My name is Elisa. I am Elisa. I volunteer at Unsilenced, and I'm an advocate for youth rights and trying to get legislation passed to protect youth from institutional abuse. I first found out about the JRC just a couple years ago, and the fact that it's been going on for 50 years or more, and I feel like what I was going to say was more like a speech than a conversation. So
do the thing.
Okay. So even though this has been, I've only known for a couple of years, it's been going on for 50 years. And although they are not the only facility, far from the only facility to use aversive therapy, or should I say abusive so-called therapy, they are the only facility that uses shock therapy. The disabled people are wearing backpacks, and if they do anything that staff finds unsuitable, they will shock them. And they have increased the power of these devices over the years. It's really just horrible to think. How could anybody think that hurting a person is therapeutic in any way? I just don't understand. And I found out yesterday that House Bill 225, which would put a ban on aversives on disabled in Massachusetts, which would in turn stop the JRC from performing the shock therapy, was just sent to study, which I've been told means that they're basically trying to quietly kill the bill. So we need to be loud. We need to get this bill passed. We need to stop the torture that's taking place in this facility and others, but this is really got to be the worst of all.
Thank you, Elisa, for your work, your advocacy for humanizing autistic people.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome. Okay, so next we have Lynn Wall. Lynn, thank you for coming to talk to us. Lynn is an autistic ADHD psychotherapist like me, and we work together quite a lot. Lynn, it's really good to have you here, especially because I know that you have just a whole wealth of experience of working with children and young people who, if geography was different, might well be sent to JRC as a response to their presentations.
Thank you, Kate. I'm really grateful to be here and to Neuroclastic for their ongoing work to really kind of raise awareness and to challenge the behaviour of people within JRC, as in the professionals, not the people living there or being cared for. One of the things I've really huge concern about, and I experience vicarious and visceral trauma every time I hear a story of a child being shocked or a person being shocked for some sort of motor behavior, whether that be a motoric discharge because of distress or a tic or not having control of their body, and they're being alarmed as a result of the treatment. And then for me, I go into that real kind of sense of we're treating human beings worse than we would treat an animal, because the kingdom world would allow their fellow animals to shake off any trauma. And what we're doing is we're allowing, by not speaking out, constant trauma and people being traumatized by the behavior of the abusive therapy, and then the impact of that. So like the thing for me that really bothers me is that we think about it in the moment, but like once that moment takes place, that trauma is with that person forever. Those psychological and physiological scars remain absolutely in that person's body and psyche, and they're trapped. Like, how can you come up and shake out the trauma because you're going to be fearful that you're going to get another shock? There's no way out. You're completely and utterly incarcerated in a system which is cruel and torturous. And I see this as war crimes towards autistic people and should be stopped. From a therapeutic perspective, I work with children and young people that are traumatized as a result of controlling their behavior. And that's at a really low level in comparison to what people are experiencing at JRC. But it's a long journey for these people to heal. But that healing does take time, and they are able to get to a place where they can have a different quality of life. But their body and their minds never, ever, ever forget. It lays dormant and it rises. And sometimes it rises so much that they are incapacitated and cannot function in the world because that trauma has been triggered and recalled and they can't shake it off. So for me, Neuroclastic and all the other organizations coming together to shut this down has to happen, and it has to happen now. We can't continue to witness people being hurt and harmed in this way. This is a violation of humanity and human rights.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
I was just going back to what you're saying about vicarious trauma before we get Jafari on, because I know he's in the middle of a protest. I was thinking about everyone here when you're talking about vicarious trauma who is sat and witnessing this, and the necessary motoric discharge that needs for us to process this trauma. Would you have any words of wisdom?
Well, let's pause that, because we have to get Jafari on right now,
Can we
because
get
he's in the middle of something. So 1 second. Jafari Jones is from Black Lives 757. Has helped us with so many projects. Jafari, can you unmute your mic so that we can hear you? Jafari's in the middle of something right now, so
can you hear me now?
welcome. Yes, hear
Can you
you
hear me?
now.
You hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
tell us what you're doing today.
Peace and blessings to everybody. I had to step away because it's super loud. I didn't know if this was on something. I didn't want to get anybody's page shut down from the music. But we're currently at one of the Juneteenth celebrations here in the 757. We actually wrote the petition to have Juneteenth recognized as a statewide holiday 3 years ago. And this is our third year while the rest of the country is catching up. And so we're just in the middle of that. But, it's very important to speak on these, inhumane tactics that are being taken on in these hospitals. I began my activist journey to become a voice for the voiceless. My 14-year-old cousin committed suicide due to bullying the last 6 years. The voiceless, unfortunately, has taken on a lot of different faces, and those are the cases that we take on. So a lot of times you won't see us involved with the big case unless we make the case big by applying pressure. But these things going under the rug, what CPS does to families, all these programs, which is why they just say abolition to all, because this is all in a racist and an unjust and an inhumane system. We're on stolen land, and with stolen, my people were stolen. Everything about this country is despicable. Until we get our stuff together, we shouldn't be worrying about other countries, because we suffer right here in America. But we don't have anybody to swoop down to save us, so we have to become those saviors and speak up for those who can right here in our own homeland.
Thank you so much for coming on. And what is BLM 757's position on shock torture of disabled people?
It's completely disgusting. And we don't stand for it. And this is here on this live stream. We're here to declare. We're ready to pull up. You know how we get down. We'll pull up a protest. We've protested as far as CPS in Arlington, Texas. We'll pull up on the White House. There's no place that's out of bounds. So we'll take the risk. Y'all can stay home. Y'all can live stream it, but we'll pull up. We just need to know the time and the place. But people who are doing this, we humanize people. So when we go to these places and have these conversations, whether it be by voice or by bullhorn or by elevated voices, they have to realize that that's the same trauma you're putting these people through. So we don't have any sympathy when, I'm cussing you out, when you're sitting up here shocking people when I'm not here. I'm not here because you offered everybody pizza. I'm here because you're shocking people. Like, I don't even think dogs should be shocked. Dogs are supposed to bark. Why are you shocking them for doing what they're supposed to be doing? So that's a whole nother story for a whole other day. But, freedom of speech, is that not freedom of speech? If people aren't allowed to do what they want to do because you've labeled them something or another. So that could be an issue on that. So there's a lot of issues to be raised. I said, I just want to come up here and show love because I love Tara, and I love the whole Neuroclastic and Justice for Deja and everything they've done to raise awareness for my cousin. So I'm always going to be here for Tara. I don't care how busy I'm at. She knows that. She ain't no too busy. Jafari's hard to get in contact with, but for Tara, I drop everything. So I love y'all, and whatever, we're here for y'all. The flag is going to always be here for y'all.
Thank you so much, Jafari. Jafari has been arrested fighting, protesting, peaceful protesting always, and just for marching on a public street has been arrested defending autistic people. So just thank you for all the risks you take for us, Jafari, and thank you for taking time out of your parade today and for everything you do for all the marginalized people that you fight for. Thank you. And
Thank you. Love
have a good
ya.
one. Love you
You
all.
too.
Are we okay to go back to Lynn for a second?
Yes.
Yeah. So Lynn, I was just thinking about the impact on what we're all witnessing, and what we could be doing to look after ourselves while we do this activism, this advocacy, and not staying still in our bodies, if that.
I think it's absolutely crucial, isn't it? Because and it really gives us a sense of the impact of others, because ours is so small in just hearing and witnessing in a way that kind of is so far away from JRC and people that have been subjected to it. But you can magnify it when you really sit with how impacted we are in a distant position, and then really think about that on a moment by moment, not knowing, not being aware of when it's going to happen, or having that pause break before it happens. You know, like all of that stuff just creates such high level of body response and adrenaline, and kind of like that whole trauma stuff takes over. So people can't think or make good decisions because they're so traumatized by the experience. One of the things I'm really interested in is people talk about, like, obviously the body movements and how that's being kind of chastised, but also the harmful behaviors. Like, I appreciate that some of the people are the most vulnerabilist there, and that they need specific care and they need attentive people. But harmful behaviors, to me, are spoken words, really. They tell you a story of the person's scare, and it's really important that we listen and we safely support them in that. And we help them to use their bodies to advocate what's really going on for them, and to really pay attention to all their non-verbal cues, or non-spoken cues, I should say. And to really, really respect that up until now, the harmful stuff that they may be doing to themselves is the only solution they have at this moment in time. And it really is important for us to pay attention to that, and to kind of think about how can we offer just another way. You know, the thing that keeps running through my brain is the kind of the sentence that my grandma used to say, which was shaking like a leaf. And I think that that's the bit that's being absolutely removed from people, like to shake like a leaf. And I think we really, really have to support people to use their bodies, and whatever other means they need to communicate with us to tell us what they need. And it's our job to be the translators, and to rock up and to be by their sides, and to help them in a way that means something to them, not to us. It's not our place to decide. It's their place. And I'm really grateful to Neuroplastic, and I'm really grateful for the conversation, and I want this stopped. JRC need to stop this barbaric treatment.
Thank you, Lynn.
You are amazing. Thank you so much, Lynn.
You're welcome. Says Tara, who's amazing.
Totally not. So now we have Karen Stepanova. I'm so happy, from the PDA Society. And thank you for joining us, Karen. Can you tell us a little bit about the PDA Society and how they feel about shock torture at Judge Rotenberg Center?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And as Lynn said, this, I mean, you're all amazing what you do. But I think for listening to this, it's been kind of, yeah, I've been crying halfway through. It's been really, really difficult. And what we do at the PDA Society is we train parents, carers, and professionals in learning how to change their perspective on how to support young and adult PDA people who are autistic. I'm autistic ADHD. So hearing some of this is traumatizing, but we try and help people change their perspective and learn how to work collaboratively with young people. And when it's at the beginning, you talked about the bill not being passed. There's extensive evidence. We use a lot of Dr. Barry Prezant's work. He's been worked for over 50 years, creating a huge amount of evidence. And he talks about the opposite of anxiety, not being calm, but being trust. And that the key fundamental thing for supporting autistic people is that they need to feel trust. They need to be able to trust the people supporting them. They need to feel that they can trust themselves to be themselves and learn how to trust. And that, do you know, I mean, that's how we see incredible change. I work with, I mean, PDA young people who are experiencing all sorts of challenging behaviours, maybe in the UK, struggling with the school system. But even simple things like reward and consequence, we would remove that from the demand that they would perceive. We would remove that, and then we see flourishing, thriving, happy young people. My son's PDA, he struggled in school. He came out. When we learned about his sensory profile, when we learned how to support him, but everything is based on reducing anxiety, helping our autistic community feel safe in every single thing they do. So what's happening is so extreme to me in the work I do. And I mean, I work with teachers in the UK, and we just talk about, yeah, okay, let's remove demands. Let's help people feel safe. Let's help people feel trusting the people that are working with them. So then to think that this is actually happening today is just it's beyond me. I can't even comprehend. So yeah, we completely stand with you, the PDA Society and the Nurture Programme. And this has to stop. The fact that it's happening is abhorrent.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the PDA Society. Do you think we'll see an official position statement in the near future?
I hope so. Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I have lost my screen, so I'm turning this over to you, Kate or Jude, because I'm trying to find where the stream is on my computer.
I'm not known for my multitasking skills. Right. Bear with me.
Okay, I found it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Seamless. It was totally seamless.
Okay,
No,
so sorry about that. I minimized something. We have a video from Ben Bro that we will try and share here in a minute, but I minimized the screen and I just couldn't find it because, ADHD and having 20,000 tabs open. But
that's okay. We have Annette with us.
Yes, Annette, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
and do you want to introduce yourself and let us know your position on Judge Rotenberg Center?
Yes, thank you. My name is Annette Smith. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a family defender in Oregon. And the perspective I come at this issue is through the lens of someone who represents young people in juvenile court. Many of my clients are children in foster care and children with disabilities. And so I became involved in looking at institutional child abuse through that perspective. I became aware of the Judge Rotenberg Center through my work doing advocacy against institutional child abuse, but also through the lens of hearing from fellow attorneys who are parents about this issue as it affects their children and in their research looking for help for their children who needed extra support. And the overwhelming response from everybody I've ever talked to about this center is that they cannot believe it's happening. They cannot believe that electroshock therapy is still being used. And especially on children. So the perspective I want to talk about today, because I've heard some of the other speakers today talk about a lot of the other things that I wanted to touch on, which includes the lack of consent and the power dynamic between adults and children that they're supposed to be serving. But I wanted to actually kind of talk about the definition of assault and battery in Massachusetts. I don't practice law in Massachusetts. That's my disclaimer. But assault and battery is defined under law in Massachusetts as a defendant commits an assault and battery by deliberately touching the victim in a way that is likely to cause bodily harm or without the victim's consent. The law further describes that there are enhancement factors when somebody is committing this crime that makes it a high-level offense. Which includes when the when the victim is a vulnerable person as defined by being a child 14 years or younger or a person with a disability. And I think that when we look at children in congregate care or in facility placements where they're using these abusive tactics, I find it highly disturbing that we are not viewing that through the lens of the crimes that are occurring to these children. And as a public defender, as a person who works in the law, I just wanted to bring that perspective too, because I think the way that children are treated in the Judge Rotenberg Center is criminal. I think we should look at it as such. I think we should consider responses to it through that lens, as well as the other ways we're looking at dealing with the issue. But these children are victims, they're crime victims. And I think until we recognize the harm that we're causing in that way, I think, the debate shouldn't just be about whether this is good therapy or bad therapy. The debate should also be about whether these children are crime victims. And so I wanted to bring that perspective today. And thank you so much for letting me speak. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the efforts that you're all doing.
Thank you so much. And that is such a powerful and important point that you make, that this is a crime. This is assault and battery. This is malignant, malicious wounding of people. And it should absolutely, I don't understand how this is not
automatically
a felony. Yeah.
Automatically considered a crime. And it feels like that's part of the dehumanization of this, that the fact that like their children, the fact that there's some kind of line in the sand that can be drawn, that is us being autistic, us being disabled, where it's not a crime anymore, that it's considered healthy, and that we're not awarded the bodily autonomy that this is violence, that there's somewhere where that's considered that we're deserving of harm. And that's what they're advocating for. That's what they're saying, that there's a point in there that we're deserving of harm, but we've never been deserving of harm. And it has to stop. Like, this whole system has to be abolished, because if we keep it up, they will use it. They will continue to use it against us on any level. And we're not deserving of that harm on any level.
And I defend behind the scenes. I work a lot of advocacy cases within the justice system where autistic people with severe motor disinhibition, meaning that they can't always control their bodily actions, have done things like smell a stranger's hair or touch a sweater because the texture looked interesting, and they don't want to do that, but they can't always stop their body from things that maybe would scare a stranger who doesn't know. And that is a thing that needs to be, explained to them, because everyone deserves bodily autonomy. But these autistic people are being prosecuted for assault and battery, for smelling someone's hair or touching a stranger's food at a restaurant. But yet what's happening at Judge Rotenberg Center is not is acceptable to happen to them. This is unbelievable. It doesn't seem like real life.
And if we look at the scale, like if we just look at the scale of action, and we look at these people, these autistic people who are charged for acting in a way that is a manifestation of what they have, and maybe they smelled somebody's hair once, and the justice system comes at them to prosecute them. But then we look at what happens to children in the Judge Rotenberg Center, and they are shocked very often, constantly, day in and day out. And if you just look at the scale of action and which gets the attention of the criminal prosecution system and which doesn't, it's just mind-boggling. And I think we should talk about it from that lens as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. I think that this has given us some very powerful talking points. I think everyone who's spoken today everyone has given us powerful talking points that we can take and fold in to our advocacy and activism. We get treated by the ABAI, the Association for Behavior Analysis International, who credentials and platforms the people responsible for this at Judge Rotenberg Center every year, have accused us of histrionics, right? Of being extremely exaggerated and as if we don't know what we're talking about. And that level, just having to assemble a task force 40 years too late to just look into this to see if it's, a good idea to be shocking people, means that they should have no authority over autistic people's lives, because they don't get it. They have proven, if they even have to think about if this is okay or not, they have proven that they are not safe for us. That this should not be something that is debatable. We shouldn't be having this debate. We shouldn't have to fight and be traumatized every single day because we know that our neuro can. This is their family to us. Like our community, other autistic people, we have just a social, a cultural, a neurological bond just to, I mean, not every autistic person probably feels this way, but we at Neuroclassic and all of you in chat, you feel community with the people at Judge Rotenberg Center. You don't feel separation from them. This is us. This is our children. This is our family. We recognize the things that people are being shocked for because we do them too. And we can't separate ourselves from that, and we shouldn't even be having this discussion. So thank you very much for coming out today and for sharing this with us and for the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I am going to try and play Ben Bro's video that he recorded for today. And if you don't follow, I'll get the link and stick it in chat for Ben's Facebook page, and you should follow Ben on social media. Ben works with us regularly and is such a powerful activist and advocate for communication rights and other things. Ben stands up for anyone who needs it. And so I'm going to try and play his video, and hopefully this works.
My name is Ben Bro, and I am a 22-year-old non-speaking autistic who uses a letterboard or typing to communicate. I am here today to be sure the voices of the seemingly silent are heard. It is egregious that this practice of electroshock still exists in today's society. No one should be the victim of such a cruel and unjustified method in the name of behavioral management, particularly our most vulnerable. We are all here today to raise awareness of this horrid policy and demand the Judge Rotenberg Center and the state of Massachusetts completely discontinue the use of this barbaric tactic. Stop that shock.
Thank you so much. Ben is watching with us backstage here, and we love you, Ben, so much, and your activism is always amazing and powerful, and I hope that you will follow Ben on social media. We'll make sure to post that video as its own separate post after we conclude this live stream. We are about at the end. We lost the people on the ground at JRC's battery died, but reports are things are going great there. So thank you all. I'm sure we'll see lots of individual videos with better sound on the ground popping up on social media, and we'll share those with you. Jude, Kate, did you want to leave any concluding remarks?
I just wanted to remind everyone, like, this, what we're doing right here it's a form of us being in community, and that a part of what this system has robbed from us is community, and it's robbed from us our humanity, it's robbed from us our right to communication, and all of these are human rights that are being robbed from us that shouldn't be up for debate. That the fact that we're trying to negotiate at any point that we're deserving of harm, when we're not, when a lot of these things are things that we can't control. If you beat me hard enough, yes, I'll stop doing something, but at what cost? The cost of my soul, the cost of my quality to life, as you cause more crisis and just keep re-traumatizing me over and over and over and expect me to heal. But honestly, you just want me to conform, not to heal. When to seek healing for someone rather than punishment would actually mean so much more. But keeping the shock therapy and keeping the Judge Rotenberg Center in existence is not seeking healing. It's not seeking communication. It's not seeking consent or bodily autonomy. It is not seeking our wellness. And we can't let it stay up because they will always use it against us. It is torture, and we cannot allow torture of anyone because none of us are deserving of that. Even if you cannot see it, we deserve to feel safe, even if you do not see the person you're in community with. So be in community now, and we have to keep moving until it is abolished, until it is gone, because we take care of each other. We communicate to each other, and we remind each other of our humanity so that we no longer have to remind it, that is automatically acknowledged. I acknowledge that in my existence, especially in being autistic, not despite it, not somehow exempt because I'm autistic, that autism is just another form of my humanity to acknowledge my humanity in that. So we deserve to live without suffering, and we must abolish the system, abolish shock therapy, abolish what keeps us down for suffering and to harm us. And we must be in community and build that together and push for that together.
Thank you, Jude.
I mean, when Jude's spoken, I kind of feel like, yeah. But what I will say is that we've all sat here and borne witness to an incredible amount of trauma, and we'll continue to do so because that's what our activism looks like. So I guess I want to invite the community. I think, Tara, can we do the same thing as we did last time we had a particularly tough live stream?
Yes, we will do that again.
We're going to do that again. So we're going to post an invitation for people to just come and hang out, share gifts, memes, and be in community with each other just for some restoration and some sense of connection. And I would encourage people that if you can and it's safe to do so, that you move your body now, because you can and because it's your absolute right. And so whatever your favorite stims are, whatever your favorite sensory experiences are, to engage in them now as a radical act of your freedom and your humanity, and to look after yourself, because this is a marathon and not a sprint, and we need you all.
And I want to read one thing from Wolfheart, who's today they're having outages with their internet, and so their signal was dropped. Wolfheart was on earlier, and Wolfheart says, JRC is nothing more than a glorified residential school. The Judge Rotenberg Center seeks to erase Black and Indigenous culture through forced amalgamation, through behavioralism. Majority of those who are harmed by the center are Black and Indigenous people. And that's not wrong. It's true. That is how these kinds of abuses we can see all through history, and they're still happening, and we can't let that happen. So thank you to everyone who joined us, to the 1 million plus people who have visited our page since the beginning of this month. We will post online for everyone, like Kate said, for everyone to be in community with us.
Tara, I have a message just before we go from Zoe Reed, who's been helping us behind the scenes today, and is with iCards, which was just, Kate, can you add that no longer can we as a global community deny the atrocities happening at JRC? It's time for the abuses to end, and those who ignore this call will be shown to have been on the wrong side of history.
Thank you, Zoe. We love Zoe. Works so hard. ICAR is International Coalition Against Restraint and Seclusion, and Zoe is on our advisory board. Just an amazing activist. So thank you, Zoe, who helped us gather so many of the guests the powerful speakers that we had today. So thank you. We love being in community with all of you, and we welcome all of you to stay around. And we will be posting a thread for everyone to regulate together and be in community together with something that's less painful than this, with something that can help us to counterbalance all the pain that we're all feeling. So thank you all, and we will see you on the page.